is Chris Collier. I am the Executive Director of Renew Theaters, and that's the organization that manages the County, Ambler, Highway, and Princeton Garden Theaters. So I really want to welcome you to this discussion of Witness for the Prosecution. And I would like to especially welcome any members of the Majestic Theater in Gettysburg, as we have just launched starting yesterday, a rebrand of the Film 101 program, titling it Deep Focus. And this is a really exciting moment for this program, in that the organization that originally gave us the funding to start the Film 101 program was so excited to see how it had grown virtually over this past year, and asked us and gave us additional funding to grow the program and to invite other organizations and other theaters to participate. So it is still the same wonderful discussion program that you know and love. It is still Film 101. We have just changed the name to Deep Focus. Film 101 will actually return, as we anticipate having some classes on the basics of film and how to read film. But we wanted to actually change the name so that it could encompass some more. The website is live, and let me actually just share with you all that you can go to deepfocus.film and see some of the upcoming events that we have scheduled along with Hannah's events in this series. We're really excited to have 4 different separate programs arranged for this fall. So in addition to the classic Hollywood films, which will continue through the fall and going forward, this is the backbone of the program, and we are definitely not changing anything about this. But we're just going to be adding additional programs. So on Monday the 20th, there's a new 4-film series led by Ann Chang at Princeton University about Asian American identity. Beginning in October, we have another 4-film series led by an Iranian filmmaker about Middle Eastern cinema. And then as we get ready for Wes Anderson's new film, The French Dispatch, late in October, we've got a series called Wes on Wednesdays, in which we will be celebrating some of the filmmakers' past films and looking ahead to what we might expect in French Dispatch. So there's a couple of those titles up on the website now, and we are working as hard as we can to fill out the rest of the series and to get those up. And it'll integrate seamlessly into our website soon, and you'll be able to see all of those great details. So I hope that you will join us for all of Hannah's upcoming films, and please check out these additional discussions as well. We're really excited to this series, and a big thank you to the Vesta Fund for allowing us to grow this series and to invite other theaters like the Majestic in Gettysburg to participate. And we are looking to add some other theaters as we continue to grow and hopefully expand this program to bring in a variety of more speakers and programs, and to support all of the community-minded theaters like ours in the region and as we expand. All right. So before I turn things over to Hannah, just a quick reminder of our Zoom protocols. As you'll see that everyone came in on mute, we will ask that everyone stay on mute until speaking. Hannah's going to start with a little back history and story about the film. So stay on mute for that, and then we will join the conversation. We ask everyone to use the raise hand feature. That will allow me to call on you. You can also use the chat, and the chat is not just for what's going on in the main conversation, but there are often a lot of very interesting sidebar conversations and interesting things going on there. And as things bubble up, I will bring those into the main conversation as we're discussing as well. And I guess the only other note is that these programs are also being recorded. So if you happen to miss one, or if you are new to joining us, we actually have an archive of them on our website, and we invite you to go back and look at past ones and watch all of these great movies and learn from the incredible insight that Hannah has shared with us. So without further ado, I'm really excited to turn over the conversation once again to Hannah Jack, a writer for Turner Classic Movies who has been guiding us over this past year through a variety of Hollywood classics ranging in all sorts of genres. And this is our first time that we are hitting the courtroom genre and a return to Billy Wilder. So without further ado, Hannah, the floor is yours.
Great. Hi, everybody. It is such a pleasure to see so many people returning. And for those of you who are just joining, thank you so much. Chris, we have been announcing the next month's title up front. So is it cool if I go ahead and do that now?
You are welcome to announce the next couple if you like.
Okay, well, we'll save some surprises, but I will talk about what we're gonna discuss for October. We get into Witness for the Prosecution. October being Halloween month, I wanted to do something a little bit chilling and thrilling, but not necessarily go the route of classic horror. So if you are a classic horror movie fan, we can come back to that. I'll take some suggestions for the future, but we're gonna go with a thriller from a decade that we have not talked about yet, which is the 1970s. It is one of the most potent, powerful thrillers, I think still packs a punch today. It's the movie The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, starring Walter Matthau. It's got a wonderful cast. And if you have not seen it, I can't recommend it enough. It is really, really a realistic, tense movie that takes place on the New York City subway, in the New York City subway system, and really is a phenomenal thriller. So we're going to do that for Halloween month, and that's going to be on Tuesday, October 12th. So I hope you'll join me for then. And I know that movie is available to stream. The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 is what it's called, from 1974. And hopefully we can see it on the big screen as well, but definitely it is available to stream. So as for, speaking of suspenseful dramas, well, let's talk Witness for the Prosecution. This is one of those movies that I really do want to know how many people coming to tonight saw it for the very first time. Just a show of hands. Amazing. Okay. And how many people have seen it multiple times? Because I think it does change in terms of repeat viewings, maybe. I won't call you out, but I will say this. If you are someone who has never seen this movie and is coming to the talk tonight thinking of watching this before you watch the movie, I warn you that there is a lot of spoiler alert here, that the twist ending is so much of the fun of watching this movie. And so if you have not yet seen it, I might say pause and disconnect and watch it. Like Chris said, it's being recorded, and watch it after so that I don't give anything away, because it's part of the experience. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and share some images with you so that we can take a look at some images as I'm talking about the movie. So you should all see a poster of the movie. Yes, we're good? Great. So I love Witness for the Prosecution for a number of reasons. It is really high up on my list of favorite classics. And I think that for me, one of the most enjoyable aspects of this is that it brought together two of who I think are two of the best storytellers in the 20th century. And that is director Billy Wilder and Agatha Christie, who wrote the original story and play that the movie was based on. So Agatha Christie wrote the story in 1925. It was first published. She then revised it for the stage. The original story and the stage play have some differences between them too. And the stage play premiered in London in 1953 and was an enormous hit, and quickly moved to Broadway the following year, 1954. So Witness for the Prosecution, the movie, comes out in 1957. So you can see that this was a hit play that producers were eager to quickly bring to the big screen. And the rights were purchased by this movie's producers, and Billy Wilder was courted to direct the adaptation. It was not necessarily a project he wanted to do. was much more often the case in Billy Wilder's career that he wrote his own material, if not from scratch, very much from the ground up, rebuilding the original source material. Very rarely did he take a stage play and really just bring it to the screen, which is not to say that he did that here, but he wasn't excited about taking a stage play and bringing it to the screen. But it was Marlene Dietrich, actually, who finally convinced him to do it. In part, she thought that this was great for him, and in part, she really wanted to play Christine Vole, and they loved each other. Wilder and Dietrich adored each other, had worked together before on the movie A Foreign Affair from 1948, if you know that movie, and they wanted to work together again. So she saw this as an opportunity, and he finally accepted, feeling assured that he could take the play and really make it his own, put his own stamp and style on it. And that's exactly what he did. So for this adaptation, he did not turn to either of his two most famous writing partners. He almost always worked with a writing partner. The man on the left there in the yellow circle is Charles Brackett. And if you've joined us, I mean, I see a lot of familiar faces. If you joined us for Sunset Boulevard, those are the two men who wrote Sunset Boulevard together, Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett. Brackett was his first major screenwriting partner. They made 16 movies together. Starting out as writing partners for other directors, they wrote Ninotchka together. They wrote Ball of Fire for Howard Hawks together. And then they wrote a lot of movies that Billy Wilder directed, like The Major and the Minor, The Lost Weekend, and Sunset Boulevard. But you'll remember probably that Sunset Boulevard in 1950 was their last collaboration. They went their separate ways after that. So that was 1950. 1957, when he's working on Witness for the Prosecution, he began his relationship with his second most important collaborator. That was the man on the right-hand side in the other circle there, IAL Diamond. And they began working together in 1957, same year as Witness for the Prosecution, on the movie Love in the Afternoon. And yet, Billy Wilder didn't turn to him to work on this movie together, this adaptation of Agatha Christie. Instead, he worked with a man he only worked with this one time named Harry Kurnitz. So if this doesn't jump out at you as like when you think of Billy Wilder movies, if this isn't one of those movies that immediately comes to mind, it might be because it was a movie that he made with a different writing partner and from a source material that was not really his own from the beginning. He chose Harry Kurnitz because he was an Anglophile. So, you know, he knew Agatha Christie work very well, and he was an experienced mystery writer. And the two of them really did make some significant changes to the play when they wrote this adaptation. The play is very, I don't know if you've seen the play, but the play is very much centered in the courtroom drama. For the movie, similarly, we talked about this with His Girl Friday, that movie was very much in its stage play version centered in the newsroom. For the movie, in both cases, they wanted to open up the action. That's what it's called when you take the action and the characters outside of that one room that the play takes place in. So they very much did that for this movie. So a couple of things that they did were they began by incorporating some flashbacks. The flashbacks are certainly not in the play. And they really round out the character of Leonard Vole because in the movie, I mean, otherwise, we only see him when he's arrested, basically, and in the court system. What we see in the flashbacks is his relationships with these different women. And there we get a sense of his life outside. And that was Billy Wilder's invention. Also, by casting Marlene Dietrich, he had to have her sing a song. So we had to have a German nightclub. That was one of Dietrich's trademarks. And as were her legs. So therein lies the excuse for ripping her pants and exposing one of her legs. That was also created specifically to tailor to her. Maybe most significantly, they realized they needed to inject humor into this mystery courtroom drama. So they invented the character of Nurse Plimsoll. She does not exist in the play or the original story. She was a creation of Billy Wilder's. And by inventing her, they invented Sir Wilfrid having just recovered from a heart attack, which was something that she could chide him about. And I'm sure if you have the experience I did, I think that the most fun parts of this movie are their interactions together. And And finally, what they really did was they built up the character of Sir Wilfrid. He is a barrister in, defending Leonard Vole in the stage play, but he is not the dynamic lion of a character that he becomes the central figure, essentially, in this movie, in the hands of Charles Laughton. So these were a lot of the big changes that really turned this play into a Billy Wilder movie. So let's talk about casting this movie. For the role of Leonard Vole, Billy Wilder had in mind first William Holden, who we saw in Sunset Boulevard. That was their first time working together. In the 1950s, they made 3 movies together: Sunset Boulevard, Sabrina with Audrey Hepburn, and William Holden was also the star of Stalag 17. So Billy Wilder loved William Holden. You can think, it's interesting to think about what this movie would look like with William Holden in this role. He also considered Kirk Douglas was the other major actor who he wanted for Leonard Vole. But it didn't work out that way because the producer wanted Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power, if you know Tyrone Power from his earlier work, was the male sex symbol of the 1930s and 40s. He was one of them. He was a matinee idol. He was a swashbuckling adventure star. This was how he kind of became famous. He fought in World War II, took time away from Hollywood, and came back and played more mature characters in different kinds of movies. And this was late Tyrone Power that we're seeing him in Witness for the Prosecution. And he didn't want to play this role. He saw it as really a minor supporting part. The reason he accepted it was because the producer offered him a 2-picture deal to make this movie and then also follow it with a movie Power really wanted to make, which was the lavish biblical epic Solomon and Sheba. I'll come back to that in a minute, but he agreed to do that on the condition that he could make both of these movies for the same producer. So that's how he got this part. And I also said before that Marlene Dietrich really wanted to play Christine Vole. Other actresses who were considered were Ava Gardner. Again, interesting to think about what it would look like with Ava Gardner, or Rita Hayworth was the other one who was a contender. But really, Billy Wilder only ever wanted Marlene Dietrich in this part, and Marlene Dietrich fought for it. They badly wanted to work together. As I said, they were friends from the time they were in Berlin before they both fled with the rise of the Nazis. So their friendship went back way back, and they adored each other. Billy Wilder referred to Dietrich as the ideal woman. And he really, I think, coached one of her best performances out of her in this movie. It was a good role for Dietrich for a number of reasons. For one thing, it tapped into this image that she had cultivated at the start of her career. So what you're looking at there on the right-hand side is some of the earliest Marlene Dietrich hits in the early 1930s. Her image was really crafted through the movies she made with director Joseph von Sternberg. And these are movies like Morocco and Shanghai Express, The Blue Angel, that really showed Dietrich as a very similar kind of figure to Greta Garbo, this exotic, gorgeous, glamorous sex symbol and mysterious one. And she cultivated that image at the start of her career and really had trouble redefining herself after she and von Sternberg stopped working together. But Witness for the Prosecution let her play a character who was a glamorous, attractive woman with a very mysterious bent and a very mysterious past. And yet this was a character that also allowed her to showcase her range as an actress. So for Marlene Dietrich, this was a golden opportunity that came around in her career. She threw herself into the movie, as did Charles Laughton. He was also extremely passionate about making this movie. And like I said, he essentially took what was a small role, a minor role in the stage play, and built it up into the heart of the whole movie. Charles Laughton, I think, is one of the best actors to come out of England. If you know his career, his career went back to the 1930s in movies, and some of his roles that you see here include Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty, one of the great movie villains, Quasimodo in Hunchback of Notre Dame. And just these 3 characters alone show you kind of the range of Laughton's talents. And he was always as powerful in everything. he was so invested in playing this role. Again, this is late in his career, that he even showed up to the set on days he wasn't required, even though he was a major movie star. For instance, there was a day where the cameras had to be on the jurors in the courtroom just to capture their reactions. And a script assistant could have read them the lines and gotten their reactions. The lead actors weren't needed, but Charles Laughton insisted on being there, and he performed all of the parts off camera to get the jury to react. And Billy Wilder said it was the greatest performance he had ever seen. That was how much Charles Laughton was interested in this movie. And it was also the last of the dozen movies he made with Elsa Lanchester, and they were married in real life, if you didn't know about them. They had been married for about 3 decades at this point, and since 1929, and they started out, actually, they met in the theater in England, and she was the bigger star at the beginning. And then his film career really took off. And for the rest of their marriage, he was always the bigger star, and she always played these supporting roles. What you see there on the bottom right is the movie The Private Life of Henry VIII from 1933, where Charles Laughton played Henry VIII, and Elsa Lanchester shows up in this brief but delicious moment as Anne of Cleves, one of his wives. And that was the movie that made Charles Laughton a major crossover star in the US, brought him to Hollywood, and Elsa Lanchester came with him. And she started to make more appearances in Hollywood movies, coming with him to Hollywood. And that led to her most iconic role as the Bride of Frankenstein. So this was the thing that she became the most remembered for, although she had a lot more interesting parts throughout her career. So then the cast also includes Una O'Connor, who's there on the left-hand side. If you're a classic movie fan, you've definitely seen her crop up in other things. She almost always plays the same type, kind of a crotchety character figure. She was a great Irish actress, trained in the stage, and became a beloved character actress in Hollywood. But this was her last movie role. She died soon after this movie. It was also the end of the road for a lot of people in the cast, or near the end of the road. For Marlene Dietrich, she only made a couple of movies after this, including Touch of Evil for Orson Welles and Judgment at Nuremberg. But this was one of her last movie credits. For Charles Laughton, he died in 1964. He only made 3 movies after Witness for the Prosecution, before his health really was declining, including Spartacus, which is what you see there. But most tragically of all was the case of Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power, as I said, was enticed to be in Witness for the Prosecution because he was going to be making this other biblical epic after it, Solomon and Sheba. That movie did go into production in Spain with Tyrone Power playing opposite Gina Lollobrigida. 2/3 of the movie was finished, and Tyrone Power dropped dead of a heart attack at 44 before the movie was done. So Witness for the Prosecution ended up being the last movie that he ever finished. And the producers of Solomon and Sheba just didn't know what to do because 2/3 of their movie was done. What they ultimately ended up doing was reshooting all of the scenes where you could see Tyrone Power and casting Yul Brynner instead. So what you're looking at there is the side-by-side of the same scene. Just on the left is with Tyrone Power, and on the right is what it looks like in the finished film. So Witness was the last movie that Tyrone Power ever made. It was not the end of the road for Elsa Lanchester. Her movie career continued well into the 1970s, all the way through the 1970s. Her subsequent roles included the zany witch in Bell, Book and Candle, which would be a great October movie, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. You should watch it in October. And Katie Nana in Mary Poppins, which was my first introduction to Elsa Lanchester. And she also was a member of the all-star cast of this spoof murder mystery, which I adore, called Murder by Death, which is a great Neil Simon movie from 1976. If you've never seen this movie, it's a parody of a murder mystery featuring parodies of all of the great literary detectives. So she plays a woman named Miss Marbles, a spoof of Miss Marple, which brings us back to Agatha Christie. But you see a lot of people in this movie, Maggie Smith and David Niven and Peter Falk and Peter Sellers. It's a really spectacular film later in Elsa Lanchester's career. Witness for the Prosecution was a huge hit when it premiered in 1957. I always like to talk about the Academy Awards because I think it's interesting, but it did win an Oscar, or was nominated for an Oscar rather, for Best Picture. And both Charles Laughton and Elsa Lanchester were nominated for their performances, as was Billy Wilder for Best Director. In every one of these categories, it lost. It lost to two movies that were both war movies set in the Pacific. That was a big thing in 1957. Bridge on the River Kwai and Sayonara won the Oscars in all of these categories. Witness did not win any. One last note is that somebody who everyone believed should have been nominated and was not was Marlene Dietrich. And part of the problem was that Billy Wilder and the producers could not advertise that she was playing dual roles in this movie. That's big Oscar bait when you're able to say that this actor is playing dual roles in a film, but they couldn't do it without giving away the twist ending. To reveal that Marlene Dietrich was playing two characters would have led audiences to look for her in a second character and then guess the ending before it happened. So Dietrich was not promoted for her performance in this movie. It's only after the fact that people realized that she was doing this extra work. But despite that, it was, like I said, a huge hit. The critics loved it too. And perhaps best of all, Agatha Christie herself later called this her favorite of all of the film adaptations of her work. So that's where I'm going to pause, and I would love to hear what you thought about the movie, maybe even how, now that we've seen two Billy Wilder movies, how they compare. And I'm going to pause my sharing right now and hear what you have to say. Here we go. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. Great. Any questions?
Yes, Valerie?
Hi, thank you for picking a Tyrone Power movie. He's my favorite all-time movie star ever. Anyway, besides that, I just am fascinated that this whole Sir Wilfrid is supposed to be this cunning fox, this dynamic lawyer, and he is, but it's those two women, Marlene Dietrich and Elsa Lanchester, both of them outfox him. They both know what's really going on. She knows that's not cocoa in his thermos all along. And Marlene Dietrich, well, my goodness, she's the slyest fox of all. So I loved it. I just loved it that they outwitted him. You know,
Absolutely.
the person who couldn't be outwitted.
Yes, absolutely. The Dietrich character outwitting him is in the original play. Of course, the Elsa Lanchester character doesn't exist outside of Billy Wilder's version. So I think that totally does add this extra layer. And I think rounds out his character too. It adds another layer of him, you know, not being always on the ball, even though he likes to think he is. It's a great point.
Brian?
Yeah, this is like the most un-Billy Wilder film in a way, because it's a straight mystery. And Hitchcock used to say that people would come up to him on the street and say that they really liked his movie Witness for the Prosecution. And, you know, that really is. It was almost like a Hitchcock film. The only thing that makes it kind of a Wilder film is the dialogue, the great banter between Laughton and Lancaster. And but it's still a great film. Billy Wilder did work in a lot of different genres, and this just proves his talent. I think this is a great film. I've always enjoyed it. It's one of the mysteries you can watch even after you know the twist, because it's just so enjoyable.
Absolutely. It's almost fun to watch how they get there in the end, again, once you know. I'm curious to know, I mean, it's a great point to think about this in the context of Billy Wilder's other movies. If you know Sunset, you know, we watched Sunset Boulevard if you were joining us. There are so many other great Billy Wilder movies, including, you know, like I said, The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, Double Indemnity, The Lost Weekend, this is a huge, huge range of genres, that Ace in the Hole, Stalag 17, that he was working in. And if you know any of these other titles, kind of where do you see elements of Billy Wilder in this movie? Even though it's an un-Billy Wilder movie. What aspects do you see that come up in his other movies? Even Sunset Boulevard, is there anything that is a connection between this and that you saw come through in both? Comedy,
There's
I see
someone who commented in the
Yeah.
comments saying the comedy.
Yeah.
Something that's different than his other things is the ending isn't as cynical as you would expect from Wilder. It's almost optimistic that he's going to defend her and she'll get off. Whereas a lot of his other films, Sunset Boulevard, Ace in the Hole, the ending is extraordinarily cynical.
Yeah.
So I guess that doesn't answer your question, but it
No,
adds
that's a
another
great
layer
no,
to
it
it.
does, yeah.
Joe?
It's just going along with what Brian just said. It's almost not a Billy Wilder film. I mean, it's a great film, and we can all agree on that. But when I think of Wilder, even his less tame movies, they're all off somewhat. They all have this element to them that no other director brings to it. It's really hard to describe, but it's just off. Hitchcock has his own thing, and I guess every director does, but this is a straight courtroom drama to me. A very fine directed one and a terrifically acted one with, a wallop at the end that forces us to remember this film forever. Without that ending, who knows? But as Brian said, it's the least Billy Wilder movie that I can think of. Maybe towards the end of his career, some of the later comedies he made with Lemon and Matthau. Later comedies, not the early ones, but I like this film a lot. I like this film because of the performances, but it's not one of the Wilder films that I would watch over and over and over and over again, like most of the other Wilder films.
It's a great point, yeah. I see some other hands too. Oh, can't hear you, Tom, sorry.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Tom.
Okay, we'll come back, yeah.
Why don't you write in the chat and I can read it. We'll come back to you, or if you want to try your mic again. Polly?
Yeah, in terms of what I maybe can see Wilder, certainly the depth of focus on character is maybe something you wouldn't get necessarily as much in Hitchcock, for example. So that's something. I was also really struck on a personal level, the idea of these two German emigres who had fled Nazis and World War II kind of, and the scenes in Germany, the recreation of those scenes, and reminding again of the movie you mentioned, Foreign Affair,
Yeah.
that she was in. And I found that really poignant, and I hadn't really paid attention to that before. So, sorry, Tom.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right. It's a direct homage to similar images in Foreign Affair. The point you're making about character, I think, is important too, because Billy Wilder actually said that the witness for the prosecution was not really that compelling to him as just a mystery. What was compelling to him was the idea of a character at the heart of it. Sir Wilfrid was the character he had in mind. And if this was a struggle for this man, I think that by adding this extra layer of him recovering from a heart attack, you add this layer not just of what's the verdict going to be in the courtroom, but will he even survive to hear the verdict, right? Like, will he and this character make it because his health is so poor? And what is his personal investment in it as a person? So I think you're absolutely right that Billy Wilder was always so focused on rounding out these characters. I would also add that the idea of these mistaken identities, these surprise identities, is very Billy Wilder. If you think about movies like The Major and the Minor, where Ginger Rogers is disguising herself as a much younger person, Some Like It Hot, of course, where Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis are in drag for half the movie. this idea of playing around with your expectations of what the person seems to be is in keeping with Billy Wilder too. But I'm seeing some great comments come through too here. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight for those of you who are not seeing the chat that Tom is having trouble with his mic and mentioned that Polly had highlighted the
Okay.
item he wanted to discuss. But John also raises the Wilder adds Christine killing Vole as a possible Wilder cynical twist. And Ida mentioned asked if Vole is not killed at the end of the play. Yes,
Vole is killed at the end of the play, not in the original story though. That was a gripe that Agatha Christie had with her own work. She, the original twist was that Christine knew her husband was guilty, that she reveals that, she was playing him to get him free, even though she knew that he was actually guilty of the crime. Christie wanted to take it a step further because usually in an Agatha Christie story, the guilty party does not go off scot-free. So she wanted to fix that. And she fixed it by having another twist where Christine, whose name is not Christine in the play, it's a different name, she turns around and abruptly kills him. And that was taken from the play for the movie. Yeah, in terms of, I guess, courtroom dramas, Chris said at the beginning that we haven't tackled this yet. Are there other courtroom dramas that you love or that you think compared with this one in any particular way? You can stick it in the chat or jump in. 12 Angry Men, yeah. Also began much more in a theatrical kind of way. Judgment at Nuremberg. Oh, and I think I saw a comment earlier on about opening up. Is it always the goal of movies to open up, to take advantage of the film medium? It depends on the director. I think some directors were more comfortable working within a single set and kind of keeping it in that sort of stage play setting. In some cases, that even benefited the story by keeping it in. Like Hitchcock refused to open up the action of Dial M for Murder, which started out as a stage play because he thought that it packed a much bigger punch by keeping it in that room. But a lot of the time, directors were very interested in opening up the action to keep audiences interested. Sometimes it can get kind of dull watching a movie. It's different seeing the immediacy of the stage play set in one room. Yeah, John.
Thank you, Hannah. There's such great background on this, such interesting information, and thinking about Wilder films, it is interesting to think about this as a Wilder film. But, and I like the film a lot. The thing that really stood out to me watching it this time.
You went back on mute, John.
Yeah. Come back.
All right, we'll come back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
there's
seen
a
some
comment.
comments about To Kill a Mockingbird. Sorry, it's worth noting that it was the same cinematographer who shot To Kill a Mockingbird and Witness for the Prosecution. Russell Harlan was the cinematographer who photographed both movies.
Sorry, I glitched out there a little bit.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for the great background. And thinking about Tyrone Power, first of all, Tyrone Power is such a great name. I always thought that was a stage name, sort of, and a really fake sounding one like Tab Hunter.
Right.
And in looking at this, that's his name. And he's like Tyrone Power the third and had a son who was Tyrone Power the fourth, who also did a little bit of acting, evidently. But the interesting thing that I found in this was he is so American. He's speaking with an American accent. His character is so American in the way that it's not British at all. And yet it would have been so easy for the film to say, oh, he's American, he was with the RAF, you know, as a volunteer or something. But they never acknowledge, they don't actually say they don't actually say he's British, but everything that they say about him suggests that he is British.
Yeah.
Which was, I found to be such a curiosity.
It's, yeah. Go ahead.
I think you watch it just thinking that he's American, and then it makes total sense.
Yeah, it's a strange, you know, it's a strange plot point that they didn't justify. It's also true that when it was adapted again in 1982, I believe for television, and in that role it was Beau Bridges who played the Leonard Vole role, again with a cast of English actors. So Ralph Richardson was Sir Wilfrid, Deborah Carr was the nurse, and Diana Rigg was Christine Vole. But then there's this American who's playing Leonard Vole. So again, it was just a plot point that they could have given him a reason for sticking around in London, and they did not. But yeah.
One other, just real quickly, one other connection, is sort of Wilderism, is that apparently when he is in the movie theater with the woman he's picking up, they're watching a movie, Jesse James, which is a movie that Tyrone Power starred in. So that's kind of a Sunset Boulevard-ish.
Love that. Yes, absolutely. Yes. It's a great point.
Tom, it looks like you are back online.
Well, I'm back online. Hopefully having trouble with my microphone. Hopefully now it's working.
Yep,
You're
we
good.
can hear you.
Good. Well, you know, I really enjoyed the film. And, you know, Polly made the point that I was going to make about Wilder and characters. It's a very character-driven film, I think much more so than it would have been if Hitchcock had done it. I think Laughton steals the movie. I think it's really his movie. It's really, you know, he is absolutely terrific in it, and really is the dominant character. Although Marlene Dietrich, I think somebody said in the chat earlier, I think it's one of her better roles. I think she is really, really great in it. And I think those two really propel it. I do think it's very odd that I think at one point Tyrone Power his character does say something about your system, and they explain about having a barrister and a solicitor and why they have to have two lawyers.
Right.
But yeah, it's odd. And my guess is the play had just Brits in it. I think there was also a later adaptation, a movie that was a British production with Toby Jones.
Yeah.
And the focus of that one was totally different. He was Mayhew, the solicitor, and he was the main character. He was the one who the remake centered around. And I think it's interesting. I think it says, the Agatha Christie story is very bare, and I think it allowed, in this case, Wilder, and in some of the remakes, some of the others, to really kind of fashion their own story and film around it. And I think that was one of the strengths in this, is that Wilder, I think he put a stamp on it because of the way he developed his characters. And then in the later version, just totally flipping it, but it still worked very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also a true of Agatha Christie works in general, that it has been the case really since the 1930s, even, that her work has been adapted in so many different ways and continues to be reimagined in so many different ways by so many different filmmakers, with relative degrees of faithfulness to the original text. And I'm curious to know if anybody, we said that this was Agatha Christie's favorite of the film adaptations. Do you have another Agatha Christie adaptation for film or television that you particularly love, or how this compares? I see. And then there were none. That's a great one. Murder on the Orient Express has been made now a couple times. Yeah. Her work, I mean, lends itself so well because she is such a tight storyteller in so many ways. Okay. I see also someone was commenting in the chat about the character actor who plays the supporting barrister. That's John Williams, not to be confused with the great John Williams, composer. John Williams, the stereotypical Brit in every movie. He, yes, was a very big favorite of Hitchcock's and appeared as the police detective in Dial M for Murder. He was in To Catch a Thief. He was in the Paradine Case. Most often with a mustache, not with a mustache in this movie. So if you didn't recognize him, maybe that's why. I see a comment that would have liked to see more interaction between Christine and the lawyer. Still didn't quite understand her, and he was curious about her, and that was the driver for the case going forward. Yes, their scenes together, I mean, they do interact in the courtroom, but they have just those two more intimate scenes together, first in his office and then later at the very end. And they're so great together. They were dear friends in real life, Charles Laughton and Marlene Dietrich. And they loved working together. Laughton even helped to coach her on her Cockney accent for that moment where she pretends to be that other woman.
Tom, I see your hand up again.
Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to add is just, you mentioned Una O'Connor, who I was just wonderful in this movie and is always wonderful. I mean, usually she's so over the top, screeching, and she was very toned down in this one, but I thought was very good. And of course, I always think of her in Bride of Frankenstein as, yes, kind of the driver there. That's really the first movie I remember seeing her in. So it was kind of nice to see her playing, she still brought, it was still her, but it wasn't as over the top as the role she usually was given.
It's possible that that's because she's the only member of the cast who was in the original production on Broadway. So she played Janet McKenzie on Broadway and reprised her role. So she may have, because she had so many opportunities to refine it, it might have helped her kind of land on a different place. Yeah.
Polly?
Hi, yes. I just had a question for Hannah, or maybe someone else, possibly, whether the monocle bit was invented for the movie. It seems very kind of Wilder-esque, or whether it was in the play.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great. The monocle twisting was Charles Laughton paying homage to his own lawyer, who apparently did that. And the putting it in his eye and getting the light to shine off of it was a Billy Wilder touch entirely. Yeah.
Great.
But that's such a great, that those shots of the light being on the monocle and then back, that's where you get so much of, I think Billy Wilder really shines through in this movie, that his own playfulness is coming through.
Right. I had seen this first in college and hadn't seen it again for decades. And that was the one thing I remembered was
Yeah.
So it definitely sticks with you.
Yeah, it's a great image.
Brian?
Yeah, Wilder's not known really as a visual stylist like a Hitchcock and stuff. But this time I really noticed, probably because I was seeing it in the theater for the first time, the end when Laughton is twirling his monocle, it flashes the light onto the knife before Dietrich snatches it and stabs. And I've never noticed that before.
I have to pay attention to that. I love that.
Such a wonderful visual that I wouldn't have noticed unless I had seeing it on the big screen for the first time. Thanks, County Theater.
Yeah.
but that was a moment where I was just in awe. Just goes to show you how many times you watch a movie, you can always notice something new.
That's so great. I love that.
And I would like to interrupt to just say we did have the film available on the big screen this past Saturday, but it also will play again Thursday night.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in seeing it again or didn't get a chance to see it, it is playing at the Ambler County and Garden Theaters on the 16th. So yeah, keep an eye out for that monocle and knife scene.
Speaking of seeing it multiple times, for those of you who had seen it multiple times, how did the surprise ending strike you? Or how did watching it, knowing the surprise ending, what was that experience like? Did it ruin it to know the ending?
Valerie comments in the chat that it still startles after all these years. Anyone else?
I never remember endings, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a multi-part twist ending, right? So even if you forget one part of it, there are plenty of others to keep in mind. I think how it gets there, even if you know the ending, kind of how it gets there can still be a surprise. Oh no, you ruined it for your family. The ending, the announcer comes on at the very end saying, don't give away the twist ending if you watched it all the way to the very end, there's an announcer who came on. They were very adamant in all the movie's promotional materials to tell people don't ruin the ending. And that was something that Agatha Christie felt very strongly about with her stage work, especially, that if there was a twist ending in it, that she didn't want any newspapers saying anything about it. And her estate continued to fight for that for a long time. I think still does. I see a lot of comments coming in. I'm just trying to catch up with them here.
Yeah, Risa?
So I think we should talk a little bit about can you hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we should talk a little bit about poor Ruta Lee, who really didn't get any, very much. The thing about seeing it, she was the girlfriend at the end, and obviously didn't get a credit in the beginning of the film. I think she was listed in the credits at the end. But what was interesting about watching it more than once is you notice her sitting with the nurse more, so you can pay more attention to the fact that she's there angsting about what's happening to her boyfriend. So that's helpful to know that for repeat viewing. But also, I just want to say, having met Ruta Lee on a Turner Classic Movie cruise, she's absolutely the most delightful human being. I just want to give a shout out to Ruta Lee.
She is still with us. She's 86 years old. And yeah, absolutely. She plays Tyrone Power's secret girlfriend in the movie. Had, a variety of other movie credits, including one of the brides in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. But yeah, paying attention to her, knowing what her reactions are, is definitely something you can only appreciate after you watched it one time through, for sure. This character, yeah. It didn't really seem like a Hollywood production with all these British actors. They wanted to film the movie in England, and it didn't work out that way. The entire thing was shot at Sam Goldwyn Studios on sound stages in Hollywood, including the entire thing basically is interiors. You're inside rooms for the entire thing, more or less. The Old Bailey was built from scratch on a soundstage. So that entire set that's so magnificent cost a total fortune and was a huge undertaking, and they recreated it as they did with all the other sets there. Great, I'm just catching up with all these comments here.
Yeah.
Watching Dietrich in the Cockney role, how good she was. A lot of people doubted whether that was really her voice saying the Cockney accent lines, but it was. Oh, and I saw the comments about Tyrone Power. He was a third generation actor. His father had been a movie star as well in the silent era, and he inherited that.
Hannah, Russell just asked if you could speak about Carter.
The butler, the man, the caretaker. Was there something that you were curious about him specifically? Who was asking that?
Yeah, Russell, if you could elaborate either in the chat or let us know.
Oh, and the mousetrap. Yeah, I see the comments. Oh, Ian Wolfe. You're talking about the actor. It was played by Ian Wolfe. He was a character actor. He appeared in a lot of movies as well. There are a lot of familiar faces in this movie. Emily French, the murdered widow, was also a character actress who appeared in a lot of things, including as the housekeeper, Frau Schmidt, in The Sound of Music. That was maybe her most recognizable role. But I know where there are a lot of Hitchcock fans out there, and she's the one who's almost strangled in Strangers on the Train on a train. Also, she is when Robert Walker looks like he's about to strangle this woman at a party. That's her too. She always plays these kind of like flighty characters. There are a lot of character actors in this movie. Yeah, John.
Hey, one other Wilder-ism or interest you're asking to compare to other Wilder movies, and we of course watched Sunset Boulevard, which was so much fun. I think Marlene Dietrich is 5 years older, was 5 years older in playing this role than Gloria Swanson was playing her role in Sunset Boulevard. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
To think of that, and she's pretty convincing for a woman who's in her mid-50s as playing, you know, the opposite, such a handsome guy like Tyrone Power. But you know, maybe that also is Billy Wilder often had younger man, older women type situation in his movies. So that's interesting also.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of a mysterious, you know, quick falling in love and quick kind of all these implications that come from that. And that's very much his style too. Yeah. I see a question about when did Laughton wed Elsa Lanchester. They got married in 1929. And like I said, she was the bigger star at that time. They stayed together until his death in 1964. They were only married to each other. Their marriage, I think, was by all accounts really a marriage of like artistic respect, and they had, you know, they had a lot of things in common, but they also they weren't, you know, it wasn't a perfect marriage. He was also gay, so that was something that he struggled with a lot, and that obviously affected their marriage too. But they were very committed to one another, and they made a lot of movies together too, and worked together on stage. And there was a lot of good and a lot of kind of not so great in that marriage, but it lasted a long time.
One interesting thing about them was that they were apparently big art collectors. And Charles Laughton was a relatively good friend of Albert Barnes of the Barnes Foundation, was a frequent guest of Albert Barnes at his both his Marion estate and his country retreat. And of course, Dr. Barnes was incredibly prickly man who was well known for putting off famous people, but apparently he liked actors, and they were great buddies. So it's just an interesting kind of
that's really interesting. Yeah, that's great. It's such local connections too. That's awesome. Charles Laughton movies, if you haven't seen many of them, I really recommend seeking out some more of his performances. There's a movie in particular that's kind of a lesser known gem called Hobson's Choice, which is another one of his later roles, where he really gives one of his like tour de force performances as the patriarch of this family that where his daughters are really, especially his oldest daughter, is really the strong one in the family, and she stands up to him, but he tries to keep control over his life and his shoe shop in London. And it's another really great comical power dynamic that showcases his unbelievable acting chops. That movie's called Hobson's Choice. So if you can find that, definitely, that's a great one too. I see we're coming up on the hour, so just if there were any other thoughts or questions or responses to the movie, especially if you were seeing it for the very first time. I'm curious to know what, for those experiences, what did you think? You can put it in the chat if you don't want to.
Yeah, feel free to just unmute and jump in. Yes, Eileen?
I loved it. It was really great. The surprises, the thing, and I had to like write it out. I was trying to do a flow chart today, and I couldn't. It was just, couldn't get my head straight on. Well, who did that first, and who gave that clue, and
Right.
did they even love each other ever? It was just all these questions. So yeah, I was very entertained by it. And then to go deeper, like, you're discussing now, and know a little bit more about the characters and the versions of the piece. That's why I had put the question, that story, was the girlfriend always in the story at the end?
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry that I missed that. Yes, absolutely. She was in the play. I don't know about the original story.
okay.
I have to go back to look at that. If somebody has an answer to that, that would be, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, it's a charming movie, and it's so funny that you try to document. It's hard to track all of the different elements of it. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. She was not in the original story. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes, it's also, that's a great point too, that Charles Laughton made one foray into directing a movie and never did it again. And it's one of the great, horror kind of thriller movies, Night of the Hunter, starring Robert Mitchum. It's an absolutely, absolutely terrifying movie. It's phenomenal, but tragically was not a huge hit and kind of spoiled Charles Laughton's hopes of being a great director, and he didn't do it again in the movies.
There were some first-time viewers in the theater on Saturday.
Oh yeah,
there were gasps when the reveal happened, which was nice to hear.
That's wonderful. That's great. Yeah, if you are able to go see it in the movie theater, I was not able to, I tragically, but if you are able to, that'd be great. Enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Was there any significance to the time? You remember how they really emphasized the 9:26, that he got home at 9:26, and then at right after she says 9:25, and I'm thinking something's happening with this. This is going to go weird somewhere. And then of course she comes in as for the prosecution and says after 10, right? So,
Right.
But was there anything about that she didn't really say, or the discussion didn't keep 9:26 as the specific time?
Yeah, I think, my read on it is that this was the alibi that he gave that she was corroborating and that she knew to be false. And so then, when they both know the truth and that is hidden from everybody until the end. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Hannah, for another
everybody.
fantastic pick and another wonderful discussion.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And I hope that you enjoy The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 next month. It's a different movie, but it's also suspenseful. And I hope you'll join us on October 12th to talk about it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And
Thank
please
you.
check out
Thanks,
Deep
Chris.
Focus. Yeah, check out deepfocus.film for more of our upcoming events and for all the upcoming films in this series. Thanks, everyone.